So at this point, I would probably guess right away that I am most likely not the only person that has noticed or even is continuing to notice the different vibe of Tokyo Xtreme Racer. I gotta admit, one of the biggest things I would say that hit me with this game the more that I play it is simply along the lines of it's not insanely loud, it doesn't have a festival thing going on, which we all do know a lot of games are kind of aiming toward that nowadays. It is also not constantly rewarding you, which is kind of interesting to think about, but it also kind of feels quiet. But here's the thing. I kind of thought about that a little bit. The game might be feeling a little bit quiet. That could be something along the lines of the atmosphere, maybe the driving on the highways with sometimes the emptiness of what's around you and stuff. Maybe that might have something to do with it. I also do like the fact on how the rivals kind of feel like they exist by themselves in a way. And what's kind of interesting, though, is the feeling of this game when you are racing at nighttime, though, with how the overall design of it is. It really does give me a PS2 era type of vibe. And the reason why I say that is simply down to the fact of the PS2 games, in a way feeling kind of lonely, but not the way that you might think, because we all do know a lot of games nowadays are, again, super flashy, different things like that, and we all do know this game is not really any of those, and to be honest, it is such a nice change. So let me elaborate a little bit more on the entire PS2 era feeling of this game kind of hitting. I'm not going to talk about this too much because we all do know the entire nostalgic thing of, how some of these games feel like that of the PS2 and all that. But in this game, you obviously have to hunt down rivals, aka the racers around the map, Tokyo Xtreme Racer. And that is something I feel like is a great idea in a way. Now, this might sound kind of stupid, but am I the only one that thought about how you're in the game finding your opponents to race them instead of being in a menu to do a race to race someone? Or in a menu to find an event? Isn't it kind of dope going out and finding the racers in that aspect? It kind of makes you feel like you're building something up or you're kind of building a scene for yourself or climbing in order to get some respect in the game by going after these rivals and beating them. And what's kind of cool though is it really does give you the overall PS2 street racing fantasy type of vibe. You know what I'm saying? Because back then, that was a really big thing that they always nailed in games. And the funny part is, a lot of people nowadays kind of want it back in a way, which is funny to me. But speaking of all of that, though, the other thing I noticed about Tokyo Xtreme Racer that really hit me with the PS2 side of it is y'all remember how the old PS2 games kind of were slow when you first started them, right? They didn't just throw everything at you in the beginning. You didn't have every single race unlocked when you started it. You didn't have 50 different races to choose from. No, it was kind of slower with the first hour or two that when you started the game that it made you kind of grind for a little bit and really try to figure things out and then really actually made upgrades feel meaningful in a way and different things that you got when you finally got that upgrade for your car you really felt like you were getting somewhere, and also, you kind of had to stay in the same car. Now, I did mention before I will be talking about the progression in a separate video, which will be coming out soon, as that's another big thing with it, but it is kind of nice seeing the slower pacing of Tokyo Xtreme Racer compared to most games in 2026-ish, or I guess you could say the newer era, because, we all do know a lot of games nowadays, again, just like throwing things at you, so that's kind of funny to me. And speaking of the entire Tokyo Xtreme Racer having a different vibe type of thing, which is something I've really been thinking about a lot the past few days, y'all notice how this game really focuses on the mood of the game when you are playing it. It's not about the best graphics ever, right? And don't get me wrong, the game honestly looks very good. I do like the style of it, but it's not about the most flashy colors and the most colorful things everywhere. It's more about the mood that the game is giving you when you are playing it. It's kind of how when they made this game, I could really tell they were focusing on making it about the cars in a way, but also the atmosphere on how that feels tied into the cars with everything with the highway hum of the road going over the bumps or seeing all the building lights in the background and noticing how some cars might have different sounds or maybe you're listening to the engine of that car more. Now, sure, people might be like, they need to update the car audio, and to be honest, I feel like a lot of games probably could have updated car audio, if you know what I'm saying. If I'm gonna be real, one game genre, or I guess you could say one genre of the racing series, I really don't even know how to put that, but I would probably say Need for Speed was easily one of the best and still is when it comes to engine sounds, alright? Fight me in the comments below if you want, but I think most people would probably agree. But overall, though, if you add the sounds to the overall highway design with the lighting and the walls of the sound going off them, dude, it really just gives you a huge vibe that you just want to sit there and kind of just race, throw on some music. And I really do think a lot of players would greatly appreciate that feeling so dang much. Now, speaking of the car part of it, one thing I also noticed about Tokyo Xtreme Racer, which again, I'll talk about this in the progression video. I want to mention that because this game definitely has a strong progression feeling to it. There is definitely some points I want to talk about there, but one thing I really liked about this game, though, as I was saying, is in the PS2 era of racing games, you kind of had to use the same car for a little while, bro. You didn't have to use 15 different cars or had to use a car, almost like they were feeling disposable in a way. You get a car, drive it for a bit, and cool, just throw it away, jump into the next car. But in Tokyo Xtreme Racer, you pretty much have to use that same car for a while. I think I did end up using the Miata for maybe like 5 hours or something in the game. Now, could I buy a different car? Probably, but I wanted to stack my money and stuff because why not? But when you are tuning the car, though, it does make it feel more personal because you have to drive that car longer. You're kind of recognizing how your car feels and what it needs to do because you're in it longer, but also what that made me do is pay a lot more attention to the rivals when I was playing this game as well. And if y'all are wondering, I am also planning a review where I'll deep dive more into some of this stuff with this game. But when I was kind of driving around with the rivals, bro, I was literally starting to pay attention to the cars they were driving and going, yep, I can't beat that car right now, or if I race that, I would probably lose. Which, if you start feeling like that emotional attachment to your vehicle or even what's going on in the game, it just hits you. And again, it's an entire vibe. Now, one of the last things I wanted to talk about with this is simply down to, we all do know how the vibe of this game is different, right? But one thing I do like about it is the fact that there is no FOMO stuff about this game. There's no microtransactions, at least not what I've seen anyway. And the game is not throwing battle passes at you and car passes and stuff. Now, if there was, like, I should probably say season passes, because honestly, car packs are not a big deal. If they did add car packs into this game with different vehicles, I'm sure myself and many others included would probably jump on and buy them because Genki really did a great job with this game, and I'd be happy to support them if they were to add some of those in there. But there's no forced time-limited cars or any of that FOMO stuff going on in here, bro. And I think that's a really big thing because a lot of people are kind of tired of that. And this game basically avoids all of it, which in itself is kind of a vibe, if you know what I'm saying. You don't have to worry about any of that. You jump in, and you kind of just play like a completed game in a way. And you all know what's hilarious is the fact that I had to say a completed game, bro. Isn't that kind of wild? But yes, most of the games back in the PS2 and PS3 era had to release finished until things started to change. But back in that day, though, most of the games, bro, they were done, and they basically had to be. And I'm getting that feeling with Tokyo Xtreme. I really can't wait to see what Genki does with newer games or even this one. It really is amazing. I'm having a wonderful time on that. But with that, there is something I wanted to say, though. Maybe we did not lose this entire era after playing this game. You know what I'm saying? Maybe we didn't lose the way these old games used to feel, because clearly Tokyo Xtreme Racer has it, which gives you an entirely different vibe than what the new games has. And it also kind of gets you in an emotional way on top of that. But maybe they just stopped designing games like this. You know what I'm saying? If a lot of these companies went back and looked at what made all the old games so special, and then they would try to implement some of that in the newer ones, like how they did with this game, can you all imagine how happy players would be, bro? Just think about that for a minute. But you know what? Let me know what y'all think in the comments below. I want to leave that with y'all. Stay tuned for a progression video as well. And I am planning some videos once I can get better cars and different stuff like that on top of it. Because so far, dude, this game is great.